The lights blazed down on the studio stage, reflecting off the polished desk where the host sat, gripping a stack of papers, just a little too tightly. His usual confidence, unshakable, smug, wasn't there tonight. Instead, his eyes flickered toward the camera, his throat tightening before he spoke. "Karoline, listen," he started, his voice a calculated mix of urgency and forced calm. "This lawsuit, it's too much. 800 million. You don't need to do this." Across the country, millions of viewers sat up a little straighter. This wasn't how he usually talked. This was desperation. Karoline Leavitt had become a force the media never saw coming. They dismissed her at first, a young, sharp-witted conservative firebrand, always ready to dismantle their narratives on live TV. But now, she wasn't just arguing with them. She was taking them to court, and they were panicking. The host forced a smile, leaning forward. "I get it, okay? You feel wronged. You think our reporting was unfair. But let's be real here. Do you really want to go through with this?" Backstage, producers whispered frantically into their headsets. This wasn't part of the plan. The network had spent weeks crafting a legal defense, convinced that Karoline would never take it this far. But here she was, staring them down with an $800 million lawsuit, and for the first time, the media was on defense. The camera cut to Karoline's response. She didn't flinch. She didn't stutter. She let the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone feel it. Then, with a slow, deliberate tilt of her head, she spoke. "You don't get to rewrite the truth just because it makes you uncomfortable." The host swallowed hard. This was going to be a long night. The host cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. His name was Mark Reynolds, a veteran of the liberal media world, known for his sharp commentary and relentless takedowns of conservative figures. He had built a career on his ability to control the conversation, to corner his guests with leading questions and force them into defensive answers. But tonight was different. Across from him sat Karoline Leavitt, her posture steady, her expression unreadable. She wasn't here to defend herself. She wasn't here to argue. She was here because she had already made her move, an $800 million lawsuit against the network. And Mark knew that if this case went forward, it wouldn't just cost them money. It would cost them credibility. "Let's talk about this, Karoline," Mark said, feigning a casual tone. "This lawsuit, it's massive. I mean, 800 million? That's not just about setting the record straight. That's about crushing a media institution. Is that really what you want?" Karoline tilted her head slightly as if weighing the question. Then she spoke, her voice calm but cutting. "What I want," she said, "is accountability." Mark forced a chuckle, shaking his head. "Come on. You and I both know how this works. You're a public figure. You've been in the political arena. The media reports, people interpret. That's just the nature of free press." Karoline's eyes didn't waver. Free press isn't the same as false reporting. The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. Mark shifted again, glancing off camera for a brief second. He was losing control of the conversation, and he knew it. The inciting moment had already happened. The network had spent months discrediting Karoline, twisting her words, painting her as a reckless extremist. They thought she would fight back with tweets, with interviews, with debates. But she hadn't. Instead, she filed a lawsuit so massive it sent shockwaves through the industry. A lawsuit that, if successful, wouldn't just be a financial loss. It would expose how narratives were shaped, how selective edits and misleading headlines were used as political weapons. And now, face to face with the woman they had underestimated, Mark had one job: to make her back down. To get her to say something, anything, that could be used against her in court. But Karoline Leavitt wasn't backing down. And the more she stayed composed, the more desperate Mark became. Mark leaned forward, his fingers tapping lightly against the desk. His usual smirk was gone. This wasn't the conversation he'd planned. Karoline Leavitt wasn't here to play defense. She wasn't scrambling for the right words. She wasn't looking for a way out. She was sitting there, unwavering, as if she had already won. Mark wasn't used to this. He thrived on guests who squirmed, who got flustered, who tried to explain themselves while he poked holes in their every word. But Karoline wasn't explaining. She was stating, and that changed everything. "You say accountability," Mark said, forcing a chuckle, "but what you're really doing is intimidation. An $800 million lawsuit? That's not about setting the record straight. That's about silencing the press. And you know it. Karoline let the words sit in the air for a moment before responding. I'm not silencing the press, she said smoothly. I'm holding them to the standard they claim to uphold. The truth. Mark scoffed, shaking his head. The truth? Come on, Karoline. What? Are you going to sit there and say our reporting wasn't factual? That we just what? Fabricated everything out of thin air. Karoline tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. You didn't fabricate everything, she said. Just enough. The words landed hard. Mark blinked, shifting in his chair. The cameras were rolling, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was the one under scrutiny. He had expected Karoline to come in hot, defensive, emotional. That would have made this easy. He could have framed her as irrational, as someone who just wanted to play the victim. But she wasn't giving him that. She was calm, and that was dangerous. Mark adjusted his tie, forcing a smirk. Okay, so let's break this down. You're claiming our reports damaged your reputation. That we lied about you. So, tell me what exactly was the lie? Karoline leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with him. You aired edited clips that stripped my words of context. You ran headlines designed to mislead. You labeled me an extremist, a threat to democracy, without a shred of factual evidence to support it. And you did it knowing full well the damage it would cause. Mark's jaw tensed. He had to regain control. Karoline, that's called journalism, he said. We report, the public decides. Karoline let out a quiet, humorless laugh. No, Mark. You don't let the public decide. You decide. You control the narrative. You push the angle that best serves your agenda, and you know it. Mark exhaled sharply, shaking his head. So what do you want? An apology? A retraction? Karoline's gaze didn't waver. I want consequences. The room fell silent. Mark was gripping his pen a little too tightly now, his knuckles whitening. You don't actually think you're going to win this lawsuit, do you? He asked, his voice carrying an edge now. Karoline smiled. Not a smug smile, not a gloating one, just a knowing, quiet confidence. I think the truth has a way of winning on its own, she said. Mark's frustration was starting to show. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. Be honest with me, Karoline. This isn't about justice. This is about politics. You want to take down this network because we challenge people like you. You don't want free speech, you want control. Karoline met his stare, unblinking. If holding you accountable feels like control, she said, maybe that says more about you than it does about me. Mark clenched his jaw. He could feel the control of the conversation slipping through his fingers. He needed a new angle, something to put her on the defensive. So tell me, Karoline, he said, his voice regaining its usual sharpness. If we're as dishonest as you say, why even come on this show? Why give us the time of day? Karoline sat back, exuding the same unshaken poise she had carried from the start. Because I want people to see exactly what you do in real time, she said. And judging by your reaction, I think it's working. Mark stiffened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in a long time, he had nothing to say. Mark leaned in, his frustration barely concealed now. So that's it? You think you can come on my show, throw out these accusations, and walk away like you've won? Karoline didn't flinch. Her hands remained folded in her lap, her posture unshaken. I didn't come here to win, Mark. I came here to expose. Mark let out a sharp exhale, shaking his head. Expose what? That a news network has opinions. That we challenge politicians who try to rewrite reality. Karoline's eyes didn't leave his. That you don't challenge. You manipulate. You craft narratives, you edit clips, you decide who gets to be the villain and who gets to be the hero, long before the truth is ever considered. Mark forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. So what? You want the courts to decide what journalism is. You want a judge to tell us what we can and can't say. Karoline's expression remained steady. I want accountability. And if it takes a judge to force that, so be it. Mark's fingers curled into a fist on the desk. He was losing. He knew it. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. He had started this conversation thinking he was the one in control, that he would corner her, press her, make her slip. But she hadn't slipped once. And now Now it was him scrambling for footing. "Karoline," he said, his voice lower now, as if trying to regain composure. "Be reasonable. This lawsuit, it's not going to change anything. If anything, it makes you look weak. Like you can't handle criticism." Karoline finally leaned forward, her voice quiet but unwavering. This was never about handling criticism. It's about stopping the lies before they cost someone more than just their reputation. Mark blinked. He had no retort, no clever spin, no way to twist her words into something else. The silence between them was deafening. Karoline stood up, adjusting her blazer. "This conversation is over." Mark opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She had made her point, and she wasn't going to give him another chance to twist it. The studio was silent for a moment, a rare thing for live television. Mark shifted in his chair, forcing a tight-lipped smile as Karoline turned and walked off set. The camera panned to him, catching the flicker of frustration in his eyes before he quickly masked it. The control room scrambled to cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Within seconds, clips of the exchange exploded across social media. Karoline Leavitt shuts down liberal host on live TV. This is why the media is afraid of her. Mark tried to corner her, and she left him speechless. Twitter was flooded with reactions. Conservative commentators hailed Karoline's composure, calling it a masterclass in handling media bias. Meanwhile, left-leaning analysts downplayed the moment, some even accusing her of dodging real questions and playing victim. Networks ran the clip on a loop, each spinning it their own way. Some painted Karoline as a fearless fighter for truth. Others claimed she was an opportunist, using outrage to fuel her lawsuit. Mark, now back from commercial, tried to regain control of the narrative. "Well, folks, there you have it. Some people can't handle a little scrutiny." He let out a forced chuckle, but it was clear the damage was done. Karoline had won the moment, and no amount of spin could change that. Karoline sat in her office, her phone buzzing relentlessly. Advisors, reporters, supporters, all wanting a statement. The lawsuit was now the headline of every major network. She picked up a remote and turned on the news. Split-screen debates filled the airwaves. Some pundits warned that her lawsuit could set a dangerous precedent. Others argued that the media had finally met its reckoning. Mark's show aired a special segment, trying to regain control of the narrative. "This lawsuit is nothing more than an intimidation tactic," he scoffed. But his voice lacked its usual confidence. He knew he had lost the battle. Karoline took a deep breath and tapped her phone. A live stream began, her direct message to the people unfiltered. "I will not be silenced. The media has manipulated the truth for too long. If holding them accountable makes me a target, so be it." The comments flooded in. Support, outrage, debate. The battle had shifted, but Karoline knew one thing for certain: this fight was far from over. What do you think? Should the media be held accountable, or is this lawsuit a step too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories that cut through the noise, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More explosive moments like this are coming soon. You won't want to miss them.